Recordings in progress. Good evening, y'all. This is Platoon. This is Foxtrot Platoon. I'm Jordan West. We're in Module 2 of Web, Week 8, Day 2. Chad Mowbray was the last person to edit this. We're on HTTP servers, y'all. And we're going to be talking about servers, requests, and responses. There's a Chat GPT bit here that you all may read that explains how servers work. I don't want to get in the habit of reading Chat GPT output for you guys. Seems counterproductive, but ultimately, the way servers and requests work, somebody has stood up a server. That server is waiting for requests. When it receives a request, it has baked-in responses. It's like somebody sitting at a window of, I don't know, the front desk. Shoot, what's a business? A dentist office is a business. The dentist office would be the server. Requests would be you. Responses is going to be what that dentist office attendant is going to tell you. So it's all like a handshake. You send a request to a server. That can be, we'll get into HTTP verbs a little bit. These are not, we need to have the word put here, but HTTP methods such as get, which is a, hey, just give me something. Post, which is, I brought you something, and I want you to save it. And generally that means you're writing to something. Delete, you can guess what a delete is a request to, hey, I want you to get rid of that. And then a put is usually an edit, right? These are the four most common, and the four we'll talk about. And if you're working with old school HTML, there's really only these ones. Delete and put aren't even a thing. You have to kind of make them look like posts, or sorry, put and deletes. But these are the most like straightforward, out of the box, most base level, what am I wanting? Different endpoints, such as like example.com, will do different things. If I send a get request here, yeah, I would get all this. We saw that yesterday with our curl. Example.com doesn't really accept posts, but if example.com kept track of, I don't know, your dental records, I could send a post request with my dental records. We have to find some way to package that up. And then that's how that would work. If it was a put, we would send some other form of package, usually in the form of JSON, which would be a request to, hey, edit your records. And then deletes often are just like, hey, go find my record, trash it. But this is your main kind of verb here. Headers are additional information to the request. The main thing that I want you to think about with headers, usually authentication credentials. If you're using an API that requires you to sign in or to have a token, usually that'll go in your headers. You're saying, hey, I want to get something. By the way, I am a card-carrying member of this dentist office. And you'll need that every time, right? You can't walk into a dentist office and say, pull my teeth out. They're going to say, who the hell are you? As well as you can't say, go delete John Doe's records. You have to have some kind of authentication, right? Well, those kind of things, get down, dude. Those kind of things are going to be, your authentication will be kept in the headers. That's handled a lot of different ways, depending on the language you're doing that. But generally, basic curl request, it's going to be something like just tossed in here as a header. Pulling up this example, I haven't even talked about it yet. Oopsies. So you all saw curl example.com yesterday, right? With the dash V is going to make it a little bit more, what is the word? Verbose. But here's how you would offer headers to this thing, right? You toss in a flag and you can make specifications to it. I didn't talk about this just yet, but authorization, you would be able to provide authorization as a key value pair. And then your value generally is going to come in the form as either your it's a password, a token. Sometimes it wants it in a string version of bearer and then your password. This is not a real password. Y'all can steal it all you want. But this is how you would, perform that. So if example.com needed you to provide a token, you would provide it via the headers. There are a lot of other things you can do with headers. This isn't going to work. And I was looking for a good example the other day and today. I didn't find one, but oftentimes you can kind of specify with example.com. This is going to give us back HTML. If we wanted to hit some endpoint that gives back JSON, it'll give back JSON. But if we wanted something else, if we didn't want JSON, let's say we wanted XML or YAML even, you can in the header say, hey, I speak this language. Can you actually hand it to me, in that manner? You can try. A lot of endpoints may or may not offer, different responses, different types of responses. They might just serve it in JSON, but you can try. Offering up a header is basically good for authentication and good for, these are kind of the things I would like to, alter the information you're giving me, I guess is the way to think about it. 99% of the time, I want you thinking about authentication with headers. And then the body, which is optional. The response may include a body, which contains the requested resource or additional data generated by the server. Real quick bash lesson. No one's speaking up. Maybe y'all do know what this is. What I'm doing here, by the way, this is just a script. I've shared scripts with y'all before. This is the same. It's bash. I can post it right here. The way I get away with multi-lining is this is a line break. So this allows us to skip down to a line. So rather than, typing out this really long, sorry, my keyboard is not my normal keyboard. Rather than doing something like this, you can, break it out. So that's all I'm doing. There's no crazy magic going on here. Oh, no. Well, now there is. So here's my curl. I'm breaking the line and I'm offering it headers. For each one of these, you do a -H. In fetches, it's not going to be quite this way. In Python, it's not going to be quite this way. We'll talk about those when we get there. But for right now, curl is what we've talked about. We're going to show you what curl does. With the body, and I don't expect you to learn all these different options for curl. I'm just, kind of using examples. You would do something like this, and anything in here is going to be a JSON body. So if we were, this is no longer example.com. This is code platoon, dentist, whatever. If I was going to send them, I don't know, some data, say, hey guys, I want to send you my my information. You got an API, I'm going to hit it. You could do stuff like name, Jordan, age. I'm not telling y'all. We're going to do this. Y'all can guess. And actually, this is probably, I'm getting to the weeds. That's why I like to copy paste, but I'd rather do it real time with y'all. You can give JSON style data into this body. So when I send a post request saying, hey, I need you to save this data, an endpoint is going to be expecting, I'm probably doing something wrong here. The endpoint is going to be expecting some kind of body, and this would be an example of a body. It would just be some JSON data, so the endpoint can look at your request, read the body from it, and do things with it. A put would be very simple. Let's say I already existed in the database, and I wanted to change my name to Daniel. I'd probably do something like, you know, I'd base it off the ID, whatever my ID was, and it would just make an update to it. It would go find the ID of the user. I already exist. I'd have to know my ID, but I could make an update to my name, do something like that. We're not really talking about puts today, but that is an example of a put. A delete would be very similar to a get, actually. We'd probably just, I don't want to get too into the, we're talking like high level, and I'm sorry if I'm losing y'all with it. I'm going to show you examples of this from our example yesterday to kind of hammer it in a little bit more. We'll read through this real fast. HTTP response. This is the status line. This is going to include your HTTP code. It's good to know the big ones. You don't have to know all of them. There's like a lot. Over, is there 100 status codes? This feels like there is. I don't ever know. Here's a list of status codes with cats. Now, there's not a, is there? I don't know how many are here. It's a good bit. Some people like cats. You might see that I have a cat. I'm not a cat person. I don't like cats, but some of y'all might like cats. So these are kind of good ways to remember the different status codes. The common ones you're going to see, usually 100 and then a 200. 300s are kind of common. Usually, sorry, not 300, a 301, which is a redirection, or rather, hey, you hit somewhere, we sent you to the right place. Oh wait, I'm talking to 308, permanently redirect. 300s are usually, you're not going to end up where you think you're going, or rather something is redirecting you for some reason or another somewhere else. Even non-coders know what 404 is. Something's not found. 403, forbidden, is usually a good indicator that you don't have authentication working. This is usually an indication you're hitting something that doesn't exist. And then 500 being the 503 being the most basic service unavailable. 500, sorry, being less helpful, internal server error. One of my favorite interview questions when we were trying to find generalists was, you get a 500 error on a website, what do you do? And you don't help them out. You just keep, every time they come up with a solution, you knock it out of their hands and you say, no, that wasn't it. Guess again. And you can make a pretty solid senior developer talk for like an hour over just what could cause a 500. So headers, a response could have a header as well. They're going to list things like the type of content they gave back to you and the length of the response. Those are the main things. They might give you some confirmation that you authenticated possibly, but I would kind of expect to see that in the body, which is also optional. The body might say something like, well, one, if you do a get, it's going to be what you get when you perform this curl. Clean it up and make it right. When did this get porked up? It's not porked up, is it? Oh goodness, that's right. I made a fake one. All this is the body because this is what it gives back. Right up to about there. Notice we talked about the headers. There it is, the content length, content type, it's text, HTML, and some other things that you may or may not care about, like the date. when this expires, when last modified, stuff like that. A lot of this may not seem useful, some of it's not, but you'll find times when such things are useful. I think seeing your request is very important, as well as the body you're going to do a lot with, but good thing to pay attention to is what kind of content you're getting back, especially if you're not reading it, if you're not going to print the output and you're just trying to work with it. Sometimes you're just not getting anything back. So it's a good, or rather, you're not getting it in the format you want to see. You'll see this a bunch with, so JSON looks like JSON, right? JSON looks like a JavaScript object. Well, sometimes it's not actually a JavaScript object. Sometimes it's just a string that looks like a JavaScript object, right? Like instead of this, it's actually this, right? It's a string that looks like an object. That can be difficult to track down. However, if you're paying attention to your curl, you're paying attention to your response request, your response to your request, you might be able to tell whether it's JSON or just a text file. Let's look at what we did yesterday. Once I spin that up. Is that running already? All right, so y'all remember this from yesterday. Let's look at some of the stuff we talked about today. I'm going to make a request to this for USD. Oh, did I leave this in a bad spot? I was fiddling with it. Let me unfiddle with it real quick. All right. So we've looked at the console. Remember, we can write JavaScript in here. We can do anything we want. We've looked at the elements, which is a nice way to break down, the individual elements. Really helps out when you're trying to format stuff. All that is great. There's a lot of tools available to us. And I'll admit, I am not, somebody who digs around with the developer tools very often because I don't develop on the front end. However, something that's useful to me that I have used is network. This will keep track of all the network calls, i.e. the server requests and responses. So let's start this over and see these populate. We're looking at the network tab right now. This is a list of basically all the network calls that we've seen. Once we make a call to our API, we see all these ones generate. Remember yesterday, we are iterating through a list of all these rates. Well, for every one of those rates, we're gonna have a call, and we can open up one of those and take a look at it. Make this a little bit easier to see. I know this can get a little convoluted. You gotta kind of get used to looking at it. But check it out. We have, for each of these requests, a list of options we can look at. I'm gonna kind of focus on headers and response. By the way, this was the response body. That's all, after our call, that's all it gave back to us. What we got. No, I don't care, Vincent. But here's the headers. So here is generally what happened. I like that it's general, and then it's got request stuff, and down here it's also request headers. But this was the request. This was what we hit, right? This is where we're hitting Chad's API that he's got set up on the Docker container. We sent out a request method get. You can see that 200 green came back. Okay, here's the remote address. That's all fine. Here's the response headers, right? As we've been talking about, response headers, status line headers, body. We can look at all these things. So a lot of this may not make too much sense. Shoot. Some of y'all may have ran into CORS errors yesterday. Notice this probably won't run into that. This accepts all cross origin traffic. The length of the response, the content type right here. This is our headers we got back. These are the headers we requested. So when we sent out the request, this is what we said. Now I know we didn't specify all that. We just did like a fetch, boring old fetch. But these are kind of the things that were baked into there. So when we made our request, that server knew all of these things about us. We said, or rather, the things we asked for, as well as some of our information, said, hey, we'll accept no matter anything, whatever you got, I want it all. I can take these kind of encodings. These are the languages I accept. Keep the connection alive. Here's my host. I don't really know what to do with all that. But origin and a bunch of other junk that you can really dig into if you want. But that's where this stuff is. I remember when I came out of Platoon, I wasn't really too clear on what headers were. And I like to avoid them. I was like, why can't we just do basic old, get, post, put? Well, authentication is important. So providing authentication via your header is a major thing that you need to understand. As well as interacting with these APIs, being specific in your request header can really change the way information goes back to you. At work, I'm working with an API that if you just do a GET request, it spits back a bunch of XML, which is useless to me. I'm not going to read that. So in my response header, I have to do something like this, or sorry, in my request header, saying, hey, give me, I want JSON. Don't give me XML. I want JSON instead. Luckily, the API has different options for that. But that's where you would specify, what you get back from the request. Oh, and this is a lot of what we've kind of talked about. I don't want to beat it too deep, but let's just look at a curl really quick one last time, because this is something y'all can see and replicate. With a curl request, you see these arrows pointing this way. That was the request header. Everything pointing this way, that was the response header. Everything below is the body. And then there's our closing message saying, hey, connection's over. Yeah. Again, a lot of the headers are optional. A lot of this junk is optional. They may provide some of this stuff. Don't freak out if you make a request and you don't see all these things. We talked about response codes. We talked about payloads. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can fire this one off. Oh, it's gonna be a curl progress. Anyhow, why am I losing my mind right now? This is an example of JSON. I don't know why we have this at the bottom of the page. If you were going to send out a body, you would need to send it in JSON most of the time. It depends on what the server requests or requires. If the server needs JSON, if it needs XML, if it needs something else, you provide it as such. It's not always going to be JSON, but JSON is like 95% of the types of information we're going to be using when we're hitting APIs. All over the place lecture, but it's a big topic to kind of talk about and hard to figure out what's to focus on specifically. But does anyone have any questions about what goes into an HTTP request, what could be contained in that HTTP response, and how to utilize curl? Keep just remind yourself there are HTTP response status codes. You should not have to memorize all of them. In fact, knowing them at all is not really beneficial. It might save you a little bit of time, but you can always look these things up. You probably will be expected to know the most common ones like 200, 300, 403, 500, 503, 403. Yeah, that's it. That's all I'm going to talk about HTTP servers.